Welcome to Drinks in the Library, the only library where drinks aren't just allowed, they are required. I'm your librarian host, Gigi Howard, and each episode I'll be interviewing a guest about a much-loved book that we will be pairing with a drink for you to enjoy along with us or consider for your next book club meetup. As always, stay curious and support your local library. Hello, Liberation Nation. This week we are talking about Abigail Thomas's memoir, A Three-Dog Life. This story is about her experience after her husband suffered a traumatic brain injury and her learning to live after a tragedy. Our drink this week is a Manhattan. The early parts of the books are set in the city, so we thought that would be a great pairing. And I'm talking about it this week with my guest, Joyce Miller. Joyce is a writer living in the Churchill section of Richmond, Virginia. She has written and indie-published 2 books. Joe Harris, The Moon is a historical fiction based on the true story of her granduncle. Look, You're Dancing is a memoir of dogs, dance, and devotion, and it's her experience of adopting 6 greyhounds over the past 20 years. Joyce is a member of the James River Writers, and before she started writing, she worked for over 30 years as a mechanical designer at a nuclear physics laboratory. I had a really good time getting to know Joyce, talking about the book, one, but also her experience as a writer, her expertise working with greyhound rescue. I think this, if you are a dog lover, this episode is definitely for you. It is all about dogs. So it was a lot of fun. I also want to mention I have gotten a lot of new subscribers and followers over the last week. So I wanted to say thank you so much for tuning in, and I see you and appreciate you. If you don't know, this is just me. I don't have a producer. I have done pretty much A to Z by myself, besides my wonderful guests and also all of the amazing people in my life who just support me emotionally. But if you enjoy it, please tell some friends about it. I started this with a little passion, a little dream in my heart, and it's been a blast, and I am just so grateful for all of y'all for listening. So without further ado, here's A Three-Dog Life with Joyce Miller.
Okay.
So Joyce Miller, thank you for being here.
Thank you for inviting me.
And so you're a writer.
I'm a writer
Right.
for the past 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
I worked for 30 years at a nuclear physics laboratory and then retired and moved to Richmond.
Mm-hmm.
And then I always wanted to write from when I was a little kid.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was a chance. Of course, the pandemic happened. Like, we retired in 2019 and the pandemic happened in March 2020. And so we were stuck at home, and I took a whole bunch of online classes, like writing a book in 90 days and things that people were offering online. And so I put out my first book, December 2020.
Okay. And what's the title of your first book?
And the first book is Joe Harris, The Moon.
Okay.
And it's historical fiction, but it's based on the true story of my granduncle who played baseball in the 1910s, 1920s.
Mm-hmm.
And he played some minor league ball, and then he went to play for the Cleveland Indians.
Okay.
And then they came to the team and said, the war's going on, the Great War, and they were going to get different players from different teams to come and improve the morale of the troops. And so they went thinking they were going to be playing baseball, but then when they got there, that was not the case, and they had to fight.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And
wow.
and so he was in the trenches fighting in World War I. And then they signed the armistice, and he hitched a ride on an ambulance to get back to the debarkation point, and the ambulance wrecked.
Oh my gosh.
And it crushed in half of his face, and he had problems with his legs, some internal injuries. He had to stay in a hospital in France for extra time, but came back and went back to play. No one thought he would. And he played in 2 World Series.
Wow.
In 1925 and 1927.
Wow.
So the story was stranger than fiction, right? It
Right.
wrote itself, I want to say.
Yeah, somebody needs to tell that story.
Yeah. So
Wow.
my cousin had done a lot of the research for the book, just because he was interested in baseball and interested in our uncle. And so I really even didn't have to do a lot of research. It was like, here's when he went, and I had to look at things that were going on at the time. But so I fell in love with it too.
Wonderful. And I do want to talk about the book that impacted you that we're going to. So your book is?
It's called A 3-Dog Life by Abigail Thomas.
Yeah.
And it's a memoir, and it's about her experience when her husband got into a car accident, he got hit by a car and had a traumatic brain injury. And then it's told over 5 years' time of what that both of them went through. And he got hit by the car because he was walking their rescue beagle. And the beagle ran out in the traffic, and he ran out after it. And they lived in New York City at the time. And evidently the beagle came back to the building, and the doorman called her and said, "Your beagle's in the lobby, but I don't know where your husband is." Yeah. And then she ran downstairs, and they found out that he had been hit by this car. And he went to a care place in upstate New York, and then she had to sell her apartment and go to buy a little house near where his care facility was. And she stayed married to him. You can't really say happily, but he went through, I guess, the bouts of he was very angry, but then he came to accept it. And she went every day, had lunch with him every day. And he lived in the moment. He didn't know future. He didn't know past.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he didn't have really any short-term memory, right?
No.
His TBI, yeah.
Yeah. And
TBIs are very common. My best friend had a TBI.
Oh.
I guess she still has it.
Yeah.
And so I've gotten to know a lot about it. And so I just wanted to mention that. It's just, I think that there needs to be more work and more focus on people that experience.
Yeah, she said that he was there, he was in there, but some days he wouldn't talk at all, and then other days he would say things that blew her mind. She was like, I don't know if it's his lizard brain talking. She would maybe have a conversation with someone about something and go to the room, and he would say something about that topic without having, like, she didn't tell him about it. He didn't hear about it from the other person. And she would be like, how does that happen? How does he know? Or are they just that connected that happened? I don't know. So.
And I do want to mention, we're going to get in the book, but the drink that you chose.
The drink. So the drink that I chose was a Manhattan because Abigail Thomas drank Manhattan. So I guess she quit smoking, quit drinking, and then when this happened, she started again.
She poured herself a Manhattan.
She poured herself 3 Manhattans, which I don't know if I could do 3. I could do 1. But I was torn between the Manhattan and a Greyhound because I do Greyhound rescue. So there's a Greyhound drink called with vodka and grapefruit juice.
Oh, yeah. Those are good, too. Yeah. That would have been good, too. Tell us a little bit about I'm curious about the Greyhound.
Okay. And also because of this memoir, I don't know if it was because of this, but I wrote a memoir also in 2022. And it's all about my time with Greyhound adoption. And I did it for 20 years and I'm on my 6th Greyhound now.
Can you only do 1 at a time?
No, I've had as many as 4 at a time.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And they're big. They're big dogs.
Yeah.
I got into Greyhound rescue because I wanted to do this dog sport called dog dancing. canine freestyle.
Okay.
And I'm a big woman, and I wanted a bigger dog. And then I was reading about the greyhounds and how they euthanized them after they were done racing. They don't do it now.
Okay.
But
when did they stop? Do you know?
It's been quite a while, probably 15 years ago. I started 20 years ago doing the greyhound rescue, and they were killing thousands of them at that time. But now most all the racetracks are closed in the United States. And there's only 2 left, as far as I know. They're in West Virginia. And so our group that's here in Richmond, which is James River Greyhounds, they still get them from West Virginia if people want to adopt one. There still are some available.
Yeah.
So anyway, I wrote about how I trained 2 of the greyhounds to do the dog dancing. And so one of the devices that Abigail used in this book, I used in my memoir, because in one of her chapters is just about all the things that she knitted while her husband was in this rehab place.
Yeah. And that was when he was in
upstate New York. And so the chapter is just 4 scarves, 3 pullovers, 4 baby hats, just this big long list of things that she knitted.
Yeah.
And I feel like it gives you this really good sense of how long she spent sitting in hospital waiting rooms or doctor's offices for him. She would just sit and knit or crochet and when you see the list, it's this huge list. And so when I wrote my memoir, I have just a chapter that's things people say to greyhound owners. Because when I walk him down the street, or when I had my other ones, people would say, "Does he run fast?
Yeah.
Does he?"
Does he?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And did you rescue him? And there's is he a Great Dane? People would say that all the time.
Okay.
So there was just these list of questions, and people would always ask these same questions. And so I used her way of, I just want this list of things.
Yeah.
So
that's really cool. That was a good idea to tie it in like that. And I was curious. So when you picked up 3 Dog Life, who were you? So
it was published in 2006. So that is quite a while ago. But I was really into dog training then. I worked my day job, but my hobby was training dogs, and I would want to read anything that had dog in the title.
Okay. Here we are.
So I would look for those kinds of books, and so that's why I read it shortly after it came out. But I was training dogs. I started out with a little mixed breed dog, and at that time you could not do any kind of sports with mixed breed dogs. The American Kennel Club, the AKC, they only put on competitions for purebred dogs. But this dog dancing you could do with any dog. And so you would just teach the dog to do some tricks, like weave between your legs or back up or circle around you. And then you would pick a piece of music and you would cue the dog to do whatever you wanted it to do at certain times in the music. And it looks like you're dancing with the dog, but really the dog is just doing what you tell it to do.
Yeah. So you picked it up because you like dogs and it has the dog in the title.
Yeah.
And then how was your experience reading it then?
And reading it, it's really an interesting book, fascinating, her writing. And I did pick out a couple.
Oh, I would love yeah.
Her way of describing things. Here's one tiny dachshund, so skinny he looks like a single stroke of calligraphy.
Oh.
So you could just picture this little dachshund and that he's just this little.
Yeah.
And then let's see. And here when she was talking about having the dog, then she got 3 dogs. She started out with just Harry the Beagle, but then she adopted 2 more dogs.
Yeah.
When she lived in her little house in upstate New York. And one of her friends came to visit, and when he left, she said, "The dogs churn around his ankles like surf when he says goodbye." And again, you could picture that, it's just, I just love her writing style and how she took such a devastating event in her life, and not to say that she was happy about it, but that she just was like, this is what happened to me and this is what I have to live with. And so I'm just going to live with it. I'm not going to look at the future. I'm not going to look at the past or what could have been. I'm just going to live this for each day.
Yeah. And I was curious, what is the title is Three Dog Life? How does she tie that into the story? What does Three Dog Life mean?
The Three Dog Life is some kind of a northern statement for people who live in cold climates. I want to say like Norway or Finland or something like that.
Yeah.
And so that's how they tell what the temperature is at night. Is like 1 dog, 2 dogs, 3 dogs. So it'd be like a 3-dog night, but
all huddled on top
of you. And so that's where it came from. Yeah.
Okay. So she changed it to 3 dog
life.
Yes. She has 3 dogs.
And now she has 3 dogs. Yeah. Yeah.
And so I'm guessing she's a big dog lover like you are.
Evidently. Yeah. Yes. And, I just loved how I don't want to say I loved it. She never blamed the dog, like even though he was walking the dog and the dog ran away or, got off its leash somehow and ran into traffic. But she never, people were saying like, how can you stand that dog anymore? Rhett Butler and Gone with the Wind, when Bonnie jumps with the pony and it breaks her neck and he goes out and shoots the pony. But she did not. She was like, no, I love this dog and this dog comforts me when I come home from the hospital. There's the dog and we cuddle up on the couch and I would never get rid of the dog. Yeah.
They're wonderful. Have you always had dogs?
No, I had them when I was a kid, and then there was a stretch when I had some cats.
Okay.
And then I switched back over to dogs.
Okay. I know. People always have strong opinions on cats or dogs. I actually am a cat and dog person. I can't talk about it. We had a dog who passed away about a year ago. And we're busy, right? So we're just staying with the cat. But maybe when we're a little bit older, we'll come back.
Maybe you'll come back. Yeah. Yeah, I think cats are easier in a lot of ways.
Oh, and 100%.
I think a dog is a perpetual 2-year-old.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so, you have to have a lot of time for a dog.
Yeah.
But I like them both. Yeah. My husband's allergic to cats.
Okay.
We don't have a cat and for the longest time. Yeah. And then, like I said, we had the little mixed breed, and then I got into the greyhounds, and then that's like a cult once you get into it.
Oh, yeah. Have you made a lot of friends through
tons of friends.
Yeah.
Tons of friends. And so I also did the home visits so I lived in Hampton before I retired and moved to Richmond. The adoption group was in Richmond. And so if they had anybody want one that was in Hampton or Newport News or Norfolk or Virginia Beach or any of the kind of 7 cities we call it, I would go and do their home visit. Yeah. And you just wouldn't believe the things people show you and tell you when you get invited to their homes. And I'm like, it's just going to be a 30-minute visit and I'm going to be in and out. And I just want to make sure you see how big they are. I would take mine with me and show them they're big. And if you have a small space, maybe you don't want one. Also, because they live at a racetrack, they don't know how to do stairs. You can train them to do stairs, but it's not the easiest thing for them to do. They'll get freaked out at a ceiling fan or seeing their reflection in the stove door. Oh. They'll walk right into a sliding glass door. It doesn't look like they should just be able to walk there. But some people would just tell you things and show you things. One guy was like, here, let me come outside and I'll show you the box where I'm going to chain him up. And I'm like, I don't think you're not going to chain this dog up.
Yeah.
And one of the very first ones I did was in Virginia Beach, and they had a house right on the beach. and it had 60 steps to go because it was like on pilings in the sand. And you had to go up all these steps to the deck to get in the house. And I'm like, they won't do it.
Yeah.
And they were like, other dogs do steps. I'm like, yes. And so perhaps you should get another dog, another kind of breed. But I said, they won't do 60 open wooden deck stairs. No way.
Yeah.
And so I got mine out of the car, and like she would go 3 steps, and mine could do a few steps. 3 steps, and then she would jump back down, and 3 steps, and she would jump back down. And the guy said, I'll carry him up and down
every day?
Yeah, 2 or 3 times a day. And I was like, you'll do it for 2 weeks, and then you'll call me and say, come and get this dog. I can't carry it up and down the steps anymore. Because that was the other thing, we would take them back if, if anything happened and you needed to give it back.
Yeah.
Versus having you take it to a shelter or something. We would take them back.
I'm glad to know that there's people taking care of these greyhounds. It's not something everybody thinks about.
True.
If you're not aware of it, most of us aren't. So, come to a 3-dog life. So Abigail's the main character. Her husband, his name is
Rich.
Who are the other? Are there other characters in the book?
She has a daughter that shows up, and she has a best friend, but they're really minor characters. It's mostly between the two of them and what she goes through and how she goes and visits him and the things he says and the things she says, and that's what it is.
Yeah, and she writes memoirs mainly. Yeah.
And she's written others besides this one. I don't know if this was the first one, but she's written several memoirs. And she didn't start writing till she was much older. She was, I think, 47 when she started writing. I think she had several kids, and she was married a couple times. I think Rich was her 3rd husband. And she got pregnant when she was 18 and got kicked out of Bryn Mawr after 1 year of college, because you couldn't go to college if you were a woman back then and you got pregnant.
Yeah.
Sorry. The boyfriend could still go. She couldn't go.
Yeah. I'm glad times have changed.
Yeah.
Mostly. There's still other issues, but yeah. So she has written mainly memoirs, though.
Yeah. I think she did. I think she written 2 novels.
Okay.
Yeah. I haven't read them, but
I know in preparing for this, I saw several times it said Abigail Thomas, who Stephen King calls the Emily Dickinson of memoir. Yeah, which, I mean, that's quite a moniker. Yeah.
Pretty good. Yeah. And I think one of her friends was one of Stephen King's editors. So one of her friends. So I think her dad was a big wig in one of the big publishing houses.
Okay.
And I think that's why she lived in New York and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So. And she probably would have stayed in Manhattan had it not been
absolutely
for her husband's accident.
Absolutely. I think she would have. And so I can identify with those things. Starting writing late in life and having a couple kids, you got to raise the kids, and then they're gone, and you can finally
do your thing.
Do your own thing.
Yeah.
And she also got into some outsider art. So I think she collected, some of her friends painted when they weren't trained or anything, but they painted stuff, and she liked it, and she would buy it and hang it in her house. And then she painted, I think, on like old window frames, painted on the glass and painted on the frame. And then I think she also did some pottery. But she was always like, I wasn't trained. I didn't go to take art classes or art history. And I just know what I like. And I just go out and make things.
Yeah. And the experience of doing it. Yeah. And the beauty of creating. Yeah. Art doesn't have to be perfect.
No. And she was like, and that's what we're here for, to make things.
Yeah. Absolutely. Leave things behind that weren't there before and to try new things. And what's your experience been opening up creatively with your writing?
With the writing, it's harder than I thought.
Okay.
but I really enjoy it. I enjoy it. So I'm working on my third book now.
Okay.
And it's also going to be historical fiction based on a true story. So I grew up in Pittsburgh and moved here in the 80s because of work. And so I would drive back and forth between Pittsburgh and here.
How long is that drive?
7 hours ish.
Okay.
And so when you go up 95, there are those brown attraction signs that are for Civil War battlefields and whatnot.
Yeah.
So there was one near Fredericksburg that said Gary Melcher's home and studio. And I thought, who is Gary Melcher's? I've never heard of Gary Melcher. And so one day the curiosity killed the cat. And so I had to stop. And I stopped. And he was this artist. He was this famous artist from the 1920s, 1930s, on par with John Singer Sargent and Whistler. But nobody's ever heard of him, right?
Yeah.
So I went on the tour of his house and
hang on, you were just driving, you stopped, and you're like, I'm doing the tour.
I'm doing the tour.
Okay. I love it.
You need to stop.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think we need more of that. And my husband and I are trying to embrace
your spontaneity.
Yeah. We're trying.
And so when I went through the house, there were like 6 paintings that his wife painted. I was like, well, this is really cool. Like I thought she was nearly as good as he was. I thought this. So then I started to look into it, and I went to the gift shop and I said, was there a book about her, his wife? And they're like, no, there's no book. I said, is there a book about him? No book. How can there not be a book?
Yeah, right.
So then I thought, I guess I have to write the book. That's what I took from that.
That's great. And how do you research?
So I started there, and they did have some little pamphlets and stuff, and I took them, and I've gone on the tour now 5 or 6 times, and I pick the brains of the docents.
Okay.
Some of them are more forthcoming than others, and so they'll tell me little tidbits and things like that, and then I would get some dates, and then, like I said, he was really famous at the time, so I also go have a subscription to newspapers.com, and I use that for a lot of research, and so I would just go back and look through the newspapers with the dates that the docents would give me, and he was in the paper all the time.
In that area. What area of the country is that?
He was in New York City. Then he went and and she was in Baltimore. She went to art school in Baltimore. She met him on the ship going from the U.S. to Europe, and he had an art school in Holland, right on the beach. And so he talked her into going to his art school, and he was 22 years older than her. And so they got married, and she went to his art school, and then he got transferred to someplace in Germany, and he had won the Grand Chevalier for the French. Like, he won all these prizes because he was this really great artist at the time.
Wow.
And he went to Germany to run the Grand Duke's art school. And then the war happened, and then they were Americans in Germany, which was not the greatest.
Yeah.
And so then they came back to the U.S. and they found this house in Fredericksburg because it was on the train that they could go to D.C. within an hour. They could go to New York City within 5 hours. They could go to Boston. So but then they could have this more quiet. He built a big studio there. He could paint there. And they were very worldly, but then they came back here.
Okay. It sounds like a lot of research. And I asked, where do you get your information from? I'm always interested in sources and how.
Because you're the librarian.
I'm a librarian. So I'm like, what are you using? And I wonder if it's Fredericksburg. So I wonder if the Library of Virginia has resources and things.
The University of Mary Washington. They own it was gifted to them by Corinne. That's the name of Corinne Melcher's. Yeah.
Okay.
And so she had no children. And when she died, he died in the 30s. And then she didn't die until the late 50s, early 60s. And she gifted the estate to the University of Mary Washington. And they have all the paintings and they own all of it. So they can loan them out. So the funny thing, so I worked in nuclear physics. My husband worked there also.
Is that how y'all met?
That's how we met.
Okay.
And I know what it's like to work with a man in the same field that you're in and see how men get treated differently than women get treated. Okay. And with her, so that was my draw to her, was like, oh, she went to art school and she could paint. And then she marries this artist and then she has to give it all up because that's what women in that time period had to do, right? But I think the reason that no one knows about him is that she decided after he died that she was going to bring all his work back there to the estate in Fredericksburg and make it a shrine to him and preserve his legacy. And by doing that, she basically cut him off from the rest of the world because Sargent's work is at the Tate Museum in London and at the Met in New York City, at Chicago. Their works and Whistler's work, they're all over the country, all over the world. And she brought all his work back to little Fredericksburg. Like,
we love Fredericksburg.
We love Fredericksburg, and it's a wonderful place to go and visit.
Yeah.
And the estate, it makes a wonderful day trip if you need a little day trip to go.
I think there's great shopping up there.
There's wonderful, great restaurants. Fredericksburg is wonderful, but it's not the art center of the world.
Sure, yeah.
And that's the point, is that she brought his stuff back there, and that's why no one knows about him. And maybe people who study art history, American art history, know about him, but
maybe not. It's very easy for someone to lose prominence because of something like that. So.
And he also poo-pooed the kind of. He wanted to paint the way he wanted to paint, and he didn't. And when Picasso and the Cubists were coming and the Surrealists were coming up, he was like, I'm never going to paint like that. I'm going to paint the way I want to paint. And good for him in that respect. Good for him.
Yeah. I wanted to ask, with Three Dog Life, the memoirs, do you read a lot of memoirs? We've already covered the dog is the central reason, but what about other memoirs? Do you like that?
I do like memoir. I like to read all kinds of things. The last memoir I read maybe was one of David Sedaris. I like him because he's funny.
He is very funny.
And I read a lot of indie author things just because I am one, and so we try to stick together. Maybe.
Yeah. What have you learned as like your experience being an indie author?
I started, like I said, during the pandemic. And so I had an online support group.
Yeah.
And it's dwindled over the people have gone on to do other things, but there's still 3 of us and we meet every week. And we just give each other moral support and that kind of thing. And then I belong to James River Writers.
That's great.
So that's a really good resource also, with a lot, both the traditionally published ones and indie published or indie authors. I meet a lot of people through that. And and then I think through social media when you're just putting things out there. So for the Greyhounds, I'm doing a webinar in September. And it's for the Greyhound Health Initiative, which is something that started in the UK. And because greyhounds have a different physique and they have a different heart rate and all kind of different things. And the other thing is that when they were killing them, as soon as they were done racing, they didn't find out about the long-term health effects. Say German Shepherds get hip dysplasia.
Exactly.
So greyhounds get osteosarcoma, which is like a bone cancer. But they weren't getting it because they were killing them. Right. So
at the end of their prime.
Yeah. And so now this group is studying all these different things that they have going on. And so they asked me if I would do this webinar normally they have veterinarians, but they wanted to try something different. So it was going to be coffee with an author. And so they asked me to do something greyhound related. So I picked the greyhound as muse and how greyhounds have from the beginning of time, because they're like the oldest breed in the world.
Oh, I didn't know
that. Yeah, they're like 6,000 years old or something.
Oh.
So anyway, it's all about the history of them in art and literature. But anyway, the woman from the UK, she was proposing this, and then one of the other people on the board was someone from Richmond from the James River Group, and she said, we should get this author, Joyce Miller, and then the other woman was like, I know her. She adopted dogs from our group. And the woman, she's like, how did you know? How do you know her?
Oh.
And so I know it has to come from social media, from putting things on social media, because when I first put out the memoir, I got picked by a book club in Australia to be their book club. And I was like, how do they know that?
Yeah. Social media.
Social media. That's what does it.
I have, I'm still getting my feet wet with this podcast, but it's growing. And I have shout out to my listeners in Japan.
See? Listeners in Japan. And maybe one of them will want a greyhound or have a greyhound.
Exactly.
You just don't know.
Yeah, you just never know. So I think it's all about being yourself and finding what you're passionate about and spreading that.
Being authentic.
Yeah.
I think that's the key.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
But it's just, so I just dropped off. They're going to give away 2 books during this webinar as like a raffle prize for people who donate money to the Greyhound Health Initiative. So I was dropping off the books yesterday, and she was telling me that about the story about the UK lady. And I was like, I just don't believe it.
Yeah. You're going to be the Greyhound memoir guru. Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's awesome. Well, coming back to 3 Dog Life real quick, is there anything you wanted to touch on about it or that we didn't get to?
No, I think we got to all the things I was going to say. I think just that I think she's got a lot of humor in her writing, even though she writes about things that are really tough. But somehow she maintains, it's not ha-ha funny.
Right.
But you can read it and not be like, want to crawl in a hole after you read it, because the subject matter is devastating. But the way she writes is just wonderful. And I think that's the important thing. And that live in the moment.
Yeah. And I think we live in such a culture of, and I say this as someone that's a very optimistic person generally, but we live in such a culture of like toxic positivity.
Yeah.
And you'll just get through it and everything's going to be okay. And I think for someone like her to tell her story of this really sucks.
It really sucks. But today we sat and he put on 2 socks. Yay.
Yay. And live in the moment.
And live in the moment.
Yeah. And who would you recommend the story to?
Oh boy, just about anyone could, people who like animals would love it, and people who are going through not even this kind of thing, but any kind of a trial would enjoy it. I think might give them a little spark to get through the day. But it's for a lot of people.
Yeah, and knowing that you're not alone.
And no, you're not alone. And like I said, she wrote it in 2006. And it's 2024, and I think it's still relevant and still go to the library and get a copy.
Yeah. I would try. Our copy's checked out, so someone else is reading it.
It is still relevant 20-some years. Yeah. And people are still reading it. So that's a fabulous thing, too.
And I wanted to ask lastly, so we talked a lot about your work. And is there anything you want to plug? You've got your upcoming book. Do you have a title for it yet?
It's going to be Mrs. Scary Melcher's The Artist's Wife.
Oh.
And it's going to be published by Brandy Lane Publishing, which is right here in Richmond. Summer 2025.
Okay.
It will hopefully be in my hand.
Good.
And I'm excited about it.
Yes. It sounds wonderful, and thanks for bringing that story to life and talking about Corinne.
Corinne? Yeah. Poor Corinne, who painted all that stuff and had to be Mrs. Scary Melchers.
Yeah. Thank you so much. And I enjoyed the Manhattan. I hope you did as well.
Thank you. I did. It was wonderful.
I just made on the fly, but I'm a bartender. All right. Thank you. Thank you for spending some time with me and my guest for an episode of Drinks in the Library. For more information about the show, you can find us on Instagram at Drinks in the Library, on the World Wide Web, drinksinthelibrary.com, or shoot me an email at drinkspod@gmail.com. Until next time, cheers.